You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. Damon Frank here with my co-host Kristina Dennis on a beautiful Wednesday morning. How you doing, Kristina?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Happy Wednesday to you, Damon Frank.
Happy Wednesday to you, Kristina. We've got a really great show for you today, everybody. So hold tight. We're going to talk a little pop culture. Then we're going to dive into the hospitality business a little bit. And wow, it's been a great week so far. I love the Clubhouse room, the Recovered Life discussion that happened yesterday. That was really great.
Very, very beautiful. Lots of good information. Lots of, how do you take a topic like anguish and grief and make it palatable? But we did it. And so many people had beautiful input. I am learning a lot, and I love our Recovered Life discussions. I love them so much.
Well, guys, we are on, just to let everybody know, we are on episode 92, Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. Welcome, everybody, to the show. Everybody that's listening on the live stream here, the podcast replay. We've had so many downloads over this last week, and we're just so thankful for everybody here and, everybody that tunes into the show and our thriving community on Recovered Life. It's so much fun, Kristina.
It really, really is. And this show's being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Make sure to like, share, follow, and leave a comment so we know what content to keep bringing. Also visit info.recoveredlife.us. That's info.recoveredlife.us, where you can make a donation that will allow us to continue to help people and join the network, which is completely free.
Thank you so much for mentioning that, Kristina. What I love is the Recovered Life Network. I had a very busy day yesterday, and I was traveling here and there. And, I was able to log on through the app and have conversations with people. I reconnected with a friend that I hadn't seen in recovery for years, and it all happened there totally for free on the app. And, just engaging in these conversations. So we always keep these conversations going after the show, after the live show in the Recovered Life community. So we hope to see everybody there. Look, a lot of pop culture news going on, and we're not a pop culture show.
Nope.
And this isn't necessarily about drinking, the segment, Kristina, but it is about behavior, which is part of the whole recovery scene, right? This whole Will Smith slap, we got to talk about it.
We do. And, first I want to say I understand that there's a lot more going on in the world than this. However, it's rare that we get to see.
Kristina, there is not anything going on in the world.
There's so much going on.
Don't you watch the news? This is the only thing going on.
It is. And I had so many feelings about it. And so, not to add to, the father around it, I'm not sure if that's the right word, fodder, I think. But the whole shocking part of it was that it was so magnified. Rarely do we get to see these bigger than life individuals making mistakes like that. We usually read about it, but rarely do we see it on live television. So it was shocking. I watched it one time, and frankly, I had a reaction to it, but I had more of a reaction when he shouted out to Chris. Will Smith shouted out to Chris saying, Lee, don't let my wife's name come out of your mouth. That actually stirred up a little bit of, that was a bit of a trigger for me, which sounds a little silly, but I always know to pay attention to that. And I remember that, my husband, we wanted to look at it again. I said, you know what, I don't need to see it again. And when I talked to people on Monday and Tuesday, my clients, all of them felt the same way. It was like a car crash. Like nobody wants to look at it. However, you're on the Oscars, and it looked staged to me until he said, what he said, and he was so angry. What did you think about it, Damon?
Well, it's interesting because what this got, it didn't trigger me in any way. I didn't feel that way necessarily about it. I have a background of working with celebrities, so it's like I understand that celebrities are people, just like everybody else, right?
Right.
And people are fallible. I know I'm fallible. I've done things that I, in retrospect, looking back, say, why did I say that? Why did I do that? I was disappointed, actually.
Mm,
I was a little disappointed because, I think that people that have celebrity have the ability to set a bar higher.
right.
Right. And I believe that it kind of wasn't called for. I understand, but you're kind of, as a celebrity, you're kind of putting yourself in that position, right?
Right.
For
Right.
people to be able to say that. And I really didn't think, honestly, that it warranted that strong of a response. Now, here's the thing. Why I wanted to have the show about this, Kristina, why I was like, I texted me, I was like, oh, but we already
Sure.
had Monday planned, but we're like, we got to do this. We have to do a show on this, is because this whole thing about how to deal with conflict, how to
Right.
deal with making an amends, how to take what is your part, what you're not. And it's funny because the whole world's kind of talking about the elements of that right now.
Absolutely, and it's interesting as a person in the recovery community, we think about these things a lot.
Exactly.
We cannot be afforded the luxury of holding on to resentments. We cannot be, we can't afford the idea of being in an emotional state that is confusing or frustrated. We have to get to the bottom of it. And after you've been around for a while, it gets a lot easier to prevent yourself from doing things that you have to go back and clean up because I really don't like that part of it. And watching it, I'm a woman, and so I had my thoughts about the violent part of it. Like I said, and but I also believe words are violent too. And I was wondering, which part of that made sense. Women often don't go duke it out when they have a problem. They have to make a statement. They have to do things. And so I took some time before I decided what I would think about that. Now, having it be on a world stage, his humanity being, absolutely recorded,
Yeah.
I actually had a little bit of a codependent viewpoint. Are you ready for this?
I know you
I
would. I know you
I
would.
I felt bad for him because I thought, "Oh, you won the Oscar,
Yeah.
and now this will always be attached to it." Like, literally, I was like, "No,"
Yeah.
and felt bad for him,
Well, I
I
will tell
did.
you, what the first thing came up for me, honestly? The first thing, obviously, codependency came up because you're a codependency expert.
Yes.
But I deal with a lot of people in what I'm going to call transitional recovery, right? So they're moving into recovery from a life of not being
Mhm.
in recovery. And one of the things that's always big, especially with guys, I'm gonna stereotype here, is that impulse control. Is the
Mm,
ability to hit the pause button. I always say hit the pause button, go outside of yourself, look at the situation and the feelings, and start sifting through what
right.
is appropriate at that time and what's not appropriate. I remember one of the things that we did, what this reminded me of is we did the holiday rescue thing, that servicing
Yes.
for people who were getting in, and we were talking about appropriate times to make amends. If this is your first Christmas sober, you don't go into Aunt Matilda's, and cousin Johnny's house and sit down and say, "Hey, remember all that crap?" And let me get you. It's just not the appropriate time. And I believe that he could have not laughed, right?
Right.
And
Right.
he
Because he
could have put a
did.
pause button on it. Yes, and then he could go later and say, "Look, that was inappropriate," and he
Mhm.
could have dealt with it in that way,
He could have
right?
issued a statement as
Yes.
easily as he had to issue a statement about his own behavior, but he could have issued a statement the next day that said, I don't know, I don't know if they're friends or not. I think a lot of us think that all celebrities are friends with each other because of the different, types of events that we see them at, so they may or may not have a relationship outside of this.
Yeah.
But I feel like he could have defended his wife's honor and the controversy over the alopecia because she had been so vulnerable about it. He could have said, I think that was low hanging fruit. And, part of me really believes that. But I know that you're right. They do open themselves up to that. I think he was probably embarrassed about the fact that he laughed, first and then got it later. It was almost like maybe there was some embarrassment about that. Maybe he was trying to right that wrong. I have no idea, but I'll tell you, it really made it uncomfortable for me. And I wonder, and since you were part of the biz for so long, what the producers and the people that were putting on the show, what they thought about it. I kind of thought that they would be really happy about it because it was such a
Yeah.
big deal. And so I felt like, oh no, they're even going to benefit on this incredibly human moment.
Well, it's interesting. I think that typically when we're dealing with something like this, I think
Mhm.
when we see this, right, as just consumers or watchers or viewers of content, it typically is somebody who is under the influence of alcohol and drugs and it has a problem, right?
Yes.
And they come in and do that. I don't think that this is the case, and we're not basically Christina and I aren't saying that this is the case with this. Here's my view, which is interesting. One, I think it was a bad look for everybody, for quite
Mhm.
honestly. Two, I don't think people care because I think it's PR. And I think, look, people don't consume content in the same way. I know I don't produce content in the same way that I used to produce content back in the day, right? So I think it's a mix, and that's sad. Actually, that's sad that our society says, well, we're just going to feed off of this. Um,
Yes.
the thing that's interesting, though, and why I originally wanted to do this segment was the whole amends side of this, because
Yes.
you have the impulse control on one side is like being able to hit the pause button, right?
Right.
And then the whole part is like, okay, well, now in retrospect, I've done something that I have to clean up my side of the street on, right? As we
Right.
always say in recovery. I didn't even like how that went down.
You didn't? Why? Why,
Yeah,
Damon? I'm curious.
and I don't know all the details. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sitting and reading all the details of this
Mhm.
because I really felt like, I really felt, and people that are listening to this might feel the exact same way with this. It's not that people make, God, I make so many mistakes and I have popped off. I mean, we've talked about it. Like,
Mhm.
I was told very early on in sobriety, you can do anything you want as if you're willing to take the ramifications of it. If you're willing to
Right.
pay the price, you could, pop off. And sometimes I've been saying, you know what? I'll be, me, Christina, like I'll say what's on my mind a lot of times. I have said stuff, and I've said somebody had told me right before, it's like, hey, the ramifications of this are going to be big. And I'm like, so I'm willing to pay it.
You're
You
ready.
know what I mean? I'm
You're
willing to go
ready.
there sometimes, right? Yeah. 'Cause I'm not dead. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah?
but in retrospect, sometimes I said, you know what? I'm not upset that I popped off because maybe it was warranted, but I'm upset that I went this far. And this is the obsessive compulsive
Yes.
side of after you get into recovery, right? Because it's this constant gauge. It's like, well, it was appropriate to say something. Like, for example, everybody's been in a situation, and I hear this a lot in 12-step groups, of somebody driving to a meeting or going to a doctor's appointment or going to work, and somebody's driving recklessly and almost
Yes.
killing people, right? To say something to them is not inappropriate. It
No.
might be dangerous in Los
Yes,
Angeles,
these
but it's
days.
not inappropriate.
It
It's not
isn't.
inappropriate, but then ramming your car into them or going crazy, and
Right.
that is like a step too far. So it's this. What I like about this is that what people are talking about is that gauge of what is, maybe it was appropriate to say something, but was it appropriate to yell that at that forum? Was it
Right.
appropriate to physically slap the guy before speaking with him?
No.
I don't think so, right? Like, so
No.
it's like this balance. And I think, people in recovery really respond to this. They're really looking at this because they struggle with, I think, especially in early sobriety, impulse control.
Absolutely, and there's these huge feelings, and when we're first feeling our feelings because we're no longer sedating ourselves, they can be really hard. I had
Yes. Yes.
this is a secret to nobody. I had an anger problem. That was one of the reasons why I drank. I kept gulping it down, and it sure as heck showed up when I got sober. And I remember that first year struggling with the huge emotions. And that's funny. I even said just 1 year because it took many years for me not to do that. And when somebody's life is stressed, I can tell you that when I was dealing with my son's diagnosis and he was very young and it was a big struggle, I lost my temper and acted like a mad woman. I remember this one scene, in a parking lot where this man was going nuts, and I literally got out of my car like I was going to fight him. And then the
Yeah.
shame that came after that. So I think it's good for us all to talk about behavior. I think it's really great as long as we can see that we are just like him. Many of
Yeah.
us are still learning, and I have no idea what was going on in his brain, but I can only imagine. And I don't know why his people didn't stop him, except that maybe they weren't close enough to do that, because thank God I've had people stop me, and pull me aside and say, okay, that's enough. Because, within 10, 20 minutes, I'm able to resolve the feeling, or it's a big sign for me to go get some rest and take care of myself. I'm the
Yeah.
boundaries person. So I think it was perfectly fine for Will Smith to say, this is a boundary. I've heard all kinds of rumors that it wasn't in the rehearsal, but I'm not sure if it was in the rehearsal, whether everybody wouldn't have thought it was fair game. So it is a complex situation. There are many, many sides to it. I do believe that Will Smith owes an amends. I know he issued a statement apologizing. I do believe that is, the right track. I just feel bad that, his night of glory, winning the Oscar, was overshadowed by this incident. So
Well,
it's
I'll tell you,
regretful.
I think the thing is when we're in a world of violence and conflict, I will say this about some because I think we need to cut people a break a lot of the times. I think
Mhm.
most people are doing the best they can with what they have, with the skills they
Right.
have. Most people, and you know what? Like I don't know Will Smith personally, but I would assume he is just like everybody else, right? He wakes up in the morning just like everybody else. He has fear and anxiety just like everybody else, right?
So true.
It might be different, and I think it's even magnified. My experience is that that's tough. You know what I
That
mean? Like if
is.
I woke up every morning and I heard somebody talking about, my kids and my family and stuff like that, I would be. It would affect me. I'd
Right.
be reading it. It would be if I'm not going to lie, it would affect me, right? But I think the thing that the big takeaway of this though is this whole impulse control and this ability to for people in recovery to deal with difficult situations, right? Like
Absolutely.
because I've been in really difficult situations, and I just admitted, Chrissy, like I've been known to pop off every once in a while and say what's on my mind. Some of that I regret, some of it I don't. Most of the time when I regret it, it's not that I said something, it's how I said it.
I
It's
was
like,
gonna
am
say.
I being, I always used to hear this, am I being loving and kind? Am I
Mhm.
being constructive? Am I being whatever, right? Like, so like I kind of keep that in mind. The hard part is just getting sucked up in the whole thing. And then this post thing about like, well, how do you really make an amends, right? In a way that is uh appropriate. And I think, for this, the people who were harmed, I think it's the younger people who see this is like fame is going to get me this, right?
Mhm.
And this is the same thing with drinking. I mean, I know this was for me. If I can drink, I'm going to be free. I'm going to do this, right? It's a lifestyle too. But,
Right.
we're the first to admit it's like the hardest thing about, I think, getting sober for people is breaking the lifestyle. Alcoholism is a lifestyle.
It is,
And there's a
and
lot of positive things in that when it's working in the
it
lifestyle.
is, and one of the stories that was overshadowed is that we lost the drummer of the Foo Fighters. He was
Exactly.
so young. I mean, he was our age, maybe a couple years younger, and had a well-documented fight with addiction and passed away, Taylor
Yes.
Hawkins. And so there is, I mean, the clear message is we have to do better. We have to do better. We have to care about each other more. And I don't know about a comic's boundaries or not. I'm certainly not a professional to state that, but I think both people had a hand in what happened, or all three of them, if you include his
Yeah.
wife. And so
Well,
we
this
have
is
to
the
do
thing
better.
that we do, and the thing is about Taylor is that the thing is about the whole celebrity thing. And I think we should do a show just on this because, and I think I'd like to actually maybe have some sober celebrities on.
Sure.
One of the reasons, and I think 12 step groups in a way got this right, but culturally and the way information has changed, it's changed a lot. So I don't think it applies as much today
Okay.
with the whole influencer culture. But one of the reasons that early 12 step groups we're like, we don't want anyone to say publicly that they're sober or not sober through this 12-step group, is because they didn't want exactly things like this. Now, we're not talking about Will or Chris Rock, because so
No.
that's not the situation. But this is a perfect example of like, they don't want people saying, well, look, hey, that person's in there, that didn't work.
Right.
Right. And look,
Right.
we know just from being sober in Los Angeles, and especially where I'm located, it's like, people that are celebrities that are in recovery. And some recover out loud, some do not. But one of the reasons why I think a lot of celebrities don't is that they know that they might be caught up in something, right?
Right.
Some sort of discussion. And if it's interpreted, or even a role that they play, if it's interpreted that they're a hypocrite or they're not doing the deal, they don't want to be that example. Now, I think it's tough in today's world to hold to that standard that was created in that whole 12-step model, to be honest with you. And I
It
don't
is.
know if look, that's a whole other discussion, but I don't even know if it's really helpful anymore.
And I think you can say you're sober without discussing how or where you get it. I don't know, attraction versus promotion is the model. And I think that as we see and as we continue to do the Recovered Life show and the different, the Recovered Life network, that we will eventually, as a society, quit holding addiction as a shameful disease.
Well,
We'll start
I think
bringing in.
one of the things that's sad about all of this, and especially the Foo Fighters drummer, right? It's like, people are like, why didn't somebody do something? And I don't know the details around it, so I don't want to paint a picture that's not real, but I know there was a history of that. Doesn't mean that that's what happened, right? Like there's but the thing is, it's interesting is that why there's always this discussion about why didn't somebody, like you said, why didn't somebody grab Will Smith and say, no,
Right.
don't do it. Right. But, and I think that there is this inability, I think a lot of the times in the celebrity culture, because the machines that are built around them, no one wants to be the first person in the parade to say, hey, this is out of control. Hey, this needs to change, because you're not going to be in the parade anymore. Right. You're gone from the parade. You're removed from the parade if you speak out against the parade a lot of time. So I think the good thing about some of this is that when we see about these overdoses, although it's sad, I think it does maybe awaken people to the fact that people, places, and things are not going to cure you from recovery, and that you're not going to cure you from alcoholism and drug addiction. That you're going to actually, no matter amount of money, I'm going to tell you honestly, I will say, personal experience from people that I know, there's no amount of celebrity, no amount of money that can get you sober.
Right.
Matter of fact, I think people that have celebrity and money have a harder time getting sober.
I agree.
Because they have too many options.
Right.
There's too many options. If you have $5 in your pocket and you're broke in Cleveland, Ohio, you have very little options, right?
So true.
If you've got a couple $100 million in the bank and a posse of people around you that will do anything that you want them to do, it's much more easy to get different options. They might not be the right options, but they are options.
Yeah, they don't have to clean up their own messes. They have the people to do that. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly that, that it's harder, for a person with means to get sober.
I think it is. So I think this is a really good lesson in general. I'm glad that people in recovery are talking about this, because it tells me that in recovery, we've evolved a lot. We're now more talking about the finesse of impulse control, how to make an amends better, how to make it better for people in our lives. I think it's great. I think it's a really great discussion to have, and something that definitely warrants thinking about.
So true. So true. This has been a couple of years of us. I've said it before. The world is doing its own inventory right now and figuring out some things.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Well, you know what, Kristina, the world is a crazy place right now too. And I think a lot of people in recovery, that we're absorbing this a lot. We absorb what's coming back at, I think I've said it before. I think that people in recovery get a rap that we're not sensitive at all. I think we're way more sensitive,
way more
than everybody else. And I think that that's why I think it plays emotionally into drug and alcohol abuse, because it's a way to escape from those feelings and things that we're sensing.
So true.
Well, look, the world is a crazy place. And one of the things I would want to take a moment here to plug this really interesting e-course that we've gotten. It's totally for free. It's a 3-day challenge.
Mhm.
It's called Can't Say No. And if you're waking up in a world of crazy every day, and it's because of the people around you and your relationship with them, and it might be because you can't say no. You just feel that you can't. You're always the go-to person. You're always the person bringing, fixing the family drama. You're always the person that is, saving the day at work. That might be a boundaries issue. Kristina Dennis put together this really great Can't Say No free 3-day challenge on Recovered Life. You can access it by going to info.recoveredlife.us. That's info.recoveredlife.us. Kristina, we're going to be back after this quick break. We've got a great segment coming up for you guys.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
And coming back from our second segment, I want to remind you that this show is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Make sure to like, follow, share, and leave us a comment. What do you think about Will Smith and making amends, as well as visiting info.recoveredlife.us. That's info.recoveredlife.us. You can leave us a donation, which allows us to continue doing what we're doing and helping others, and join the network where we continue the conversation off air. That's info.recoveredlife.us.
Yes, it's going to be a great segment, Kristina. And thanks so much for mentioning the donation side of it. I was thrilled. I had a little trip I had to do on Tuesday, and I came back and I looked at the amount of downloads we have. And I was like, wow, this is really, people are really using this information and they're really getting it. So every donation helps us put that word out there, because you might be in recovery for a while. You might be doing the deal, but there's a lot of people, they're trying to get into this, Kristina. They're trying to get into the sober lifestyle. They might be coming in, they might be coming out of the sober lifestyle, and the show helps people live their best recovered life. So we'd like to thank all of you, and thank you so much, Kristina, for mentioning that. Look, I found this news article, and
I love it.
This was right up your alley, because I know you used to be in the hospitality business
I
when you
did.
got sober. And this is the Examiner, the San Francisco Examiner, I believe, put this out. And I'm going to bring it up on stage a little bit. And we want to have a whole segment about sober and working in the hospitality business, because so many people do work in the hospitality business that are sober.
Right.
But it is sometimes a little struggle, Kristina. I mean, as you know, you share that a lot.
Absolutely. I love the article because it is bringing light to it. That industry is notorious for alcoholism and drug addiction, as well as all of the others, sex addiction, crazy drama, relationships. And being somebody who started working in a restaurant at 18 years old, by the time I was 21, I was a seasoned veteran in many ways of this kind of lifestyle. And I know that in the sober community, there aren't that many examples sometimes for us to look at, and it's even more secretive because the lifestyle is around alcohol and drugging and party scene, and it's actually sometimes, and I love that she brought this up, it actually sometimes is rewarded. The person that they interviewed, Gina Helvey, who started the first Ben's Friends work, I don't know what you would call it, group, I guess, Ben Friends group, talked about the fact that sometimes her tips got bigger. You think about a bartender doing shots with customers. You think about how that continues to be reinforced. And so if you find yourself in a situation like I found myself in a situation, it was very difficult to find people that were in food and beverage, that were in hospitality, who were sober. And I love that they gave this space in the San Francisco Examiner to this, because there are a lot of people in the hospitality industry that need help. They
Oh, yes,
need to know.
absolutely. Yeah,
They need to
absolutely. And
know
what I
somebody.
loved about this is that I actually got sober in San Francisco. So I know San Francisco very well. And San Francisco is a big drinking town.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Culturally, it's very about alcohol. And there's a lot of bars, and the hospitality business, Kristina, is very, very, just like in Orange County, is very, very big. I wanted to read this because I thought this encapsulated it well. This is the San Francisco Examiner. We've got this up on screen for the people that are listening on the podcast, but I'll go ahead and kind of describe what we're seeing here. This is an article by Sydney Johnson that was written earlier this month, and she says in here, sober living can seem impossible for some professionals in the food and beverage industry, where cultural pressures like the after shift drink can make efforts to curb drug or alcohol habits feel like it's at odds with one's workplace. And I thought, wow, that really summed it up, because I will tell you, when I first came into the recovery scene, right, when I first got sober, I worked as a bartender. That was something I could not do after the first week. So like, it was just something for me personally, as much as I needed to do it. Kristina, I have a lot of admiration for you. Like, I could not do it. I just felt it was too dangerous for me.
It was. The culture in the food and beverage business is very much, we drink after our shifts. We have parties whenever we have a day off. You know, a lot of times if you're working the dinner shift, it's very, very normal. I know lots of places where people allow their employees to drink. I got sober in the business, and I stayed in the business for many years after. Eventually, I made a transition to sales of the business, but it was a huge part even when I was sober. And when I got sober, I only had one person that I could think of who was a restaurateur that had been sober for, a decade, and was told, oh, go to him, if you need help. In my meetings, I didn't really find that many people. I mean, I remember doing exactly what this article said, where a captain would show up to the restaurant that I owned with my first husband, and they would be drunk, and we would cover for them. We'd see, go home, we'll change the seating, we'll figure it out. I remember specifically one young gentleman who was apparently trying to get sober, but didn't share it with us, showing up drunk for the shift, had to go home. I was stuffing him full of coffee, telling him, go take a shower. And get it together, before I realized that this was probably something that was going to kill him.
Well, you know what? It runs rampant because I think it's such a fast-paced business, and it's secular. So like every day it's the same thing in a weird way. But I do with the rewards. It was interesting that she was saying it's like it's at odds with it, because the rewards I remember as a bartender, the rewards where you would get free drinks.
Absolutely.
Or, you could even, in some bars, you could even drink for free anyway. It wasn't, no one really freaked out unless you were falling down drunk, if you could do your job, right? They didn't really care. It's something that they didn't really care about that much. Now, things have changed a lot, but looking back now, I look at the lifestyle of that, even in my 20s, in my early 20s, I was like, wow, looking back now, I was thinking about this the other day. There was a guy that I worked with, and he was like, I don't know, 35 or something. And this guy looked like he was burnt out already. And I was thinking back on this. I was like, he'd already had 3 or 4 DUIs. He'd been through it. And he was like in his early 30s. And I was like, he was having health problems, all kinds of stuff. And I was like, wow, looking back, I didn't catch that. I really didn't catch it, because I was in the middle of it, right? I was in the middle of that lifestyle. But it runs rampant there. And I think what's really great about this is that people who really like hospitality, they love serving, they can stay in that. And I know there's groups right now of sober bartenders that in the food and beverage industry, that's what they're like. There's whole bars where a majority of the people are sober.
So true. And this article kind of highlights the first group in San Francisco, but it was started by a pretty famous restaurateur, Steve Palmer. And they did it after their best friend, or a dear friend of theirs, had overdosed and died. And they didn't realize that person had tried to detox several times and couldn't. Now, Steve is actually 20 years sober. So that's why the name of the organization is Ben's friends, because that was Ben, their friend that passed away. And their whole idea was they wanted people to know that there are lots of people in the hospitality business that understand the crazy hours, that understand the lifestyle, that want to stay in the business, don't want to be told you've got to get out of it, you've got to change your life, you've got to change your job, but don't exactly have that idea of becoming sober. You and I've talked about it. Being in
Mhm.
that business, I didn't even know a sober person until somebody let me know that,
Right.
Noel hasn't drank for 11 years. And it still wasn't even a full known secret. So when I read about this, they've already grown to 15 cities. I thought, this is amazing. They have online meetings at the hours that people who work a dinner shift or work a breakfast shift can attend. And that just makes it so much better that you're going to have people that are like-minded, that understand the crazy part of the business, that aren't just going to say, oh, you got to quit your job. They will continue to help you stay sober. She, in fact, said that. And it was interesting based on our last segment, and that is
Mm.
Gina Helvey, that her dream was to own a restaurant. And once she owned her restaurant, nobody checked her, right? She started drinking because nobody said, hey, boss, you need to cut out. Hey, maybe this is a problem. Nobody felt like they could, so she kind of
Well,
got herself into that same situation where people around her wouldn't tell her the truth.
exactly. And I totally see this, and why that would happen. And what's interesting about this is that looking back on this now, I think the hard part with early sobriety and working in that business is that I have to be honest, and maybe I'm a slow learner, very, very well might be, but I did not know anyone who was sober when I got sober. Like literally, like I didn't. I mean,
Right.
to be honest with you. So, uh, but and the thing is that I think that I didn't have, and a lot of people that work in that business don't have a healthy relationship with alcohol. Like they
No.
always say, like, whether you're recovered or not, and I believe this, like people in recovery, it doesn't matter. I have decades of recovery. I do not have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I don't
Right.
think like everybody else. I don't like most people, Christina, honestly. Like I was out the other day with some friends. They're not in recovery. They don't have an alcohol and drinking problem. They went, they were very excited about ordering a couple cocktails with dinner. We had a great time. They stopped. They ate a little bit more. They went home. They went about
Right.
their lives. They're not, it's for them, it's entertainment. Like, hey,
Sure.
this is a breakout. It's like going to a movie. Like you go to a movie, you watch it. They're not obsessed with that, 5 days later, dressed up at work, like Lord of the Rings or something, right? After you've seen a movie on Friday night.
Right.
But this is alcoholism, right? And drug addiction. So it's like not the ability to not be able to put it down. I think later you realize the difference between, hey, look, my way that I view alcohol, like why would you leave a glass of wine? That still
Ex-
baffles the shit out of me.
yes, totally.
Like, why would anyone do this? And then, my normie friends and family will say, like, it's like, well, because I just don't want it. And I'm like going, so something's wrong with you, right? Like,
Right.
I don't, but now I understand the difference. It's like, well, my thinking's not like their thinking, right? They're not thinking
Hmm.
like this. So I think that you have to you need people around you. But the point of this, I was going to say, Christina, is that one of the things that people go out on in early recovery, or just in recovery in general, are work issues,
Hmm.
relationship work. You talk about this. You do coaching on this a lot with people who have
Yes.
relationship issues, codependency issues at work, right? Me, which is all tied into work, right?
Right.
And you're taking a huge issue like that, and the pressure of not having anyone around you that's sober, feeling that you're not going to get promoted or something's not going to happen for you because you are sober, that's daunting.
It
That's
is.
tough.
It is, and I'm not gonna lie, there were times when I was sober, and I am still sober, but when I was in the business where I felt a little prejudice from
Mhm.
other people, and I felt a little judged, knowing, like, we
Sure.
went out as I was I was a food and beverage director by the time, an assistant general manager, and so there was the exec team, and it was always part of a celebration. toasting, all of that. And there were definitely times where I felt like I was the other. And we talk about this in the Holiday Rescue
Mm,
about having a really hard inline and out time, going and saying what you need to see and leaving. Part of my
yes.
job at
Yes.
the end was to host big employee parties. And I remember I worked for a community that actually wasn't in the restaurant business, where they laughed off the debauchery of these employees when they went to the Christmas party and had stories about the ambulances were called, and everybody thought it
Hmm.
was funny and they weren't talking about the seriousness. And then they would stop talking around me because they knew that I was sober. And so there are definitely things that we have to navigate as sober people, no matter what industry you are in. And it helps. I mean, it is literally the success that I've had has been based on peer to peer support.
Absolutely. And I think having that peer to peer support, people in these organizations that are sober and doing the deal, and knowing that there are people that you can talk to in that, I think it makes all the difference.
So
Christina,
true.
this has been an amazing episode 92 in the can, Wednesday,
All
March
right.
30th. Hey, we've got what next episode's going to be April. Don't we have an April Fool's episode coming up?
We do. We do. TGIF sober. We sure do.
It's
Coming
going to
up.
be fun. It's going to be fun. Guys, before we leave here, I just wanted to kind of let everybody know about these recovered life discussions that we've been having on Clubhouse every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 4 days a week at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Christina and I come to you on these discussions. You can join in on the discussion. So here's how you do it. Just go to info.recoveredlife.us and join the Recovered Life Network. You can do it right there. You go to recoveredlife.us. You can join, become part of the community, get access to all of this really, really great information, and join the discussion. We're going to be talking about Will Smith later today. We're going to be talking about being a sober bartender in the hospitality business. Those discussions are going on all the time in Recovered Life. So please join us. Please
Please.
join us.
So much fun. Hope to see you there.
Absolutely. Episode 92 in the can. We will see you guys Friday.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.